My name is 𝘱𝘳𝘦𝘴𝘢𝑔, and I'm a rising sophomore at Princeton University. I'm interested in public policy, specifically international relations. When I began looking for colleges, I knew that one of my top goals was getting away entirely from Cincinnati. In fact, it was getting out of Ohio. However, my mom thinks it's one of life's great ironies, simply because when her job with Procter& and Gamble brought my family from Mexico City to Cincinnati only a month after my fourth birthday, one of my parents' top reasons for the move was settling down in a calmer, safer place. But I want to leave that calmer, safer place now. I want to leave for somewhere I think is more exciting, has more to offer. So I left. I went 500 miles away to Princeton, and I was very excited about some very mundane things. I liked that I could walk everywhere. I could walk to coffee shops, to restaurants of varying cuisine, few of them national brands, and much more. Meanwhile, the closest store to my house is a Menards, a 16-minute walk away. The closest restaurant is a Raising Cane's, an additional 2 minutes away. And when my family first arrived, they were just empty lots with no sidewalks along the road. I found moving 500 miles away was an upgrade just on this difference alone. But I also started to ask, isn't it kind of ridiculous that I needed to move so far away just to find a place that didn't feel like a collection of super wide roads and super large parking lots? Meanwhile, my new friends and I at college started to joke about all the Why I Left New York essays. The form started about 50 years ago with Joan Didion's prize-winning Goodbye to All of That. But now, the essays are filled with cliches about having gone to New York to find oneself only to have since moved on to a new phase of life. It got me thinking about the question of why one chooses to leave a place. I mean, I had my own reasons to leave Cincinnati, but I hadn't really examined them in any critical manner. And as I worked with Midstory this summer, I stumbled upon a couple new questions. If people have such strong reasons for leaving a place they feel compelled to write essays, what makes them choose wherever they're going next? And if we're talking about the Midwest, what do cities like Toledo and Cincinnati need to do in order to get all the people leaving bigger coastal cities to choose them? What would it take for the Why I Left New York essay to become the Why I Chose the Midwest essay? Now, to clarify one thing, I don't hate the Midwest. I just see some roadblocks in the way of getting people to choose this region with so much enthusiasm, it spurs an essay form, even approaches cliche. If you ask me what the roadblocks are and how to clear them, I can think of three things that Midwestern cities should do. They need to further develop a narrative of vitality and opportunity. They need to invest in and prioritize their own existing communities. And they need to strengthen their sense of a connected community. One big question at Midstory is figuring out the Midwestern narrative and redefining it for the future. From the work I've done with Midstory to my own lived experiences, this work is crucial because we need to ditch the dying Rust Belt narrative that is as the main Midwestern story. Instead, let's encourage the already existing stories of growth, success, and transformation that show Midwestern cities have sustainable futures. You know, all throughout my childhood, the main story I heard of the area was one of there not being much to offer me here, of the place being a hollow shell of its former self. Of course, there's some truth to that. Cincinnati's population, for example, peaked in the 50s and 60s. At one point, it led the nation in population decline. Industry and manufacturing left, and jobs, wealth, opportunities followed. It's a narrative familiar to many Midwestern cities. But this narrative is only one of a rich tapestry of Midwestern stories. It doesn't capture the totality of such a large, diverse region. And critically, it's a narrative that did only one thing for me. It made me want to leave. Why would I want to stay in a supposedly dying place? What's dying is only an older version of this region. In its place, a newer version has started to emerge. In fact, for the first time in decades, some Midwestern cities like Cincinnati have seen their population grow. It's slow growth, but it's growth. Still, this newer version of Midwestern cities can't fully flourish if we allow the dominating story to be the decline of the older version. As much as we at Midstory want people to engage with all the differing stories waiting to be told, if there's only one Midwestern story the country gets to hear, why should it so consistently be the one casting a shadow? Why can't the defining story be the one that shows the blossoming life and future of the Midwest? Additionally, Cincinnati's past contraction only holds within city limits because the overall metropolitan area has actually enjoyed consistent and tremendous growth during the same time period while the city proper faced an exodus. So how can the city itself capture some of the growth the metropolitan area has enjoyed for so long? My answer is Midwestern cities need to push back against sprawling suburbs that extract value from the city but contribute little to nothing in return. Instead, cities need to invest in nurturing their own existing communities. The recent history of Cincinnati's development has been one of catering to ever expanding and increasingly distant suburbs, to the detriment of the city itself. In many ways, cities like Cincinnati and their suburbs don't have a mutualistic relationship. The New York Times editorial board recently described Indian Hill, one of Cincinnati's wealthiest suburbs, as a parasite, taking what it values from Cincinnati while contributing little to it as possible. One effect is in education. The Ohio Department of Education gave Cincinnati Public Schools a score of D on its latest school report card, while Indian Hill Exempted Village got an A. Of course, there are numerous factors that affect the student outcomes and the scores of these school districts, but it's hard to ignore the fact that Indian Hill had about 50% more money to spend per student than Cincinnati had in the same year. Moving on, a look at Cincinnati maps show a history strangled by highways. With the hope of making the city more accessible, especially for growing suburbs, I-75 was built. In the process, over 25,000 residents were forced out and much of the West End was destroyed. The once bustling neighborhood is now home to asphalt and industrial parks. Other highway lanes separate Cincinnati from what used to be its lifeblood, the Ohio River. It's a separation that's only somewhat been remedied by recent development of the riverside. And living in a suburb of Cincinnati myself, I've experienced the isolation they create. Often suburbs have everything you might need to live a comfortable life to the point where there's no need to ever go into the city at all. This disconnect from the city may be convenient for some, but it also raises the question, how can a city possibly benefit from any growth of its metropolitan area if suburbanites see no role for the city in their lives? Where does this leave a city? Well, Midwestern cities need to develop with a focus on the city itself, making it a more desirable place to live than the suburbs, so that cities themselves start growing again. Of course, cities can't entirely ignore the communities beyond, but they do at the very least need to prevent any more development that benefits the suburbs to their own detriment. Returning to the stereotypical narrative of a Midwest in decline, the hot item in many supposed solutions to this is jobs. So many politicians, for example, promise to protect jobs or somehow bring them back, even if most know they won't return. As much as jobs and economic investment are important, people need more than a job. This isn't to minimize their importance, but especially not in the current crisis, but cities should be much more than just places of work. I mean, what good is a city that's only alive during business hours? This question reminds me of a friend's high school graduation party, only a handful of steps from the Cincinnati Reds Stadium. It was mid-afternoon, and I parked a couple of blocks away so I could walk around the city a bit. I was astonished by the lack of people on the street. It was a game day. It was the very core of the city, and it felt like a ghost town. Rush hour, however, would bring gridlock to the same streets. Jobs may fill downtown office buildings, but they don't prevent the emptiness I saw that afternoon. Working to ensure Midwestern cities are more than just business parks may be more urgent than ever before. With so many people working from home, places that are little more than offices are dead. This shows the Midwestern city of the future needs to be one that promotes community interaction, especially since the Midwest is already prone to creating that isolation. An isolation that may be good during a pandemic, but the question remains, what good is a city that stands empty unless people go to their office? I'd rather our cities be places where people live, not just work, where they're pushed to weave a rich social network. In my mind, This looks like walkable cities with generous public spaces that draw life out from private homes and businesses. It looks like city rich with accessible public goods like libraries, schools, playgrounds, and fields that promote engagement with other community members. It looks like cities that aren't overly dependent on private enterprises to provide these spaces, since they can easily exclude people or simply disappear one day. I'd rather our cities be a place where people stay to live, to grow and connect, instead of only rushing for work and then leave it a ghost town at the end of the day. So, after asking, what if the Why I Left New York essay became the Why I Chose the Midwest essay? I guess the next question might be, what does a Why I Chose the Midwest essay even look like? My hope is that an abridged version one day goes something like this. I chose the Midwest because it is a rich, complex place full of diverse people and widespread opportunity. I chose the Midwest because it is full of growing, sustainable cities that earnestly invest in themselves. I chose the Midwest because it is full of strong, tightly connected communities with people not isolated from their neighbors. I've seen Cincinnati transform over the past 16 years. I've explored the complexities of the Midwest this summer at Midstory, and through both, I've seen the seeds of a Midwestern future for which people are so enthusiastic, they write essays about choosing the Midwest. They're seeds just waiting to sprout and to flourish. Thank you.